Now, I'm going to start this video out by saying or making clear that I don't think the general or basic idea behind the Acolyte was a bad one. The idea that we could get a Disney Plus series from the dark side point of view, that was certainly not a bad one at all, and it's actually been something many fans, myself included, have been asking for quite a while. In fact, some of my favorite Star Wars books of all time do this. They give us the dark side perspective and do it quite brilliantly, such as the Bane trilogy and the Plagueis novel, for example. They give us a fascinating look into the minds and lives of those who use the other side of the Force. Problem is, or one of the problems with the Acolyte was, that the show didn't really do that so much. It really wasn't a story about the Sith or from their perspective or point of view, as much as it was a story about the Jedi, or the failure of multiple Jedi, and how someone then fell to the dark side because of that. Also, the writing, and thus the show itself, in my opinion, you can feel differently, but it just kind of felt like a mess, like it was a bit all over the place and was trying to be or say so many different things that it never did or said any of them all that well. Which kind of makes sense if you read or listened to any of the interviews Headland has given about the show. She has talked about all the different things that inspired her or that she wanted to include or pay homage to, or how this was all based on the movie Frozen, yet takes inspiration from the Clone Wars episode The Wrong Jedi as well. Or how this certain character, and I think it was Yord, was based off a character in a D&D campaign she played. While another is, well, almost literally supposed to be Trinity from The Matrix, right down to being played by Carrie-Anne Moss. Or is heavily inspired by X-23 from the Logan movie, again, right down to being played by Daphne Keane. And though, sure, in all fairness here, pretty much all stories draw inspiration from others that the creator has read or watched or played or whatever it might be, she is certainly not the first person to do something like this, to draw massive inspiration from all over the place. Even, of course, George Lucas has talked about the many different things that inspired him to create Star Wars. However, Star Wars distinguished itself from those inspirations and became its own thing. George Lucas took the inspirations and told a story with a very clear vision and purpose, and that feels like more than a hodgepodge of many different things. And I can't help but feel like Headland could never really see beyond the inspirations to make something truly her own, something truly unique, even though, yeah, you do also have to balance that against playing in the sandbox that is the Star Wars universe. You can't truly make it your own. In fact, in a recent interview, she even talked about how the very last scene of the show kind of paid homage to Fight Club, that it was even essentially supposed to be the exact same shot. And what she said was, the reason I wanted to do that is because that composition to me represents a standing together. Simple intimacy in front of burning the world down. And the dramatic irony and the tragedy of Osha and the Stranger is that we know they won't do that. In another interview, she then also said of that ending that even though Osha and the Stranger are standing there sort of looking out at the sunset ready to conquer the world, the tragedy is we know they don't. We know there can only be two. We know Plagueis is there. We know that those two are doomed in some way. So to me, it's a bittersweet tragedy, this foreboding ending, but that's because I know about the Sith lineage and all those other things, whereas I think a different subset of the audience can be like, they're married. And this is all a rather strange thing or things to say, that it's a tragedy that Osha and the Stranger will fail when they are, they're the bad guys in the story. We really shouldn't want them to win and burn the world down, right? It would almost be like saying the tragedy at the end of Revenge of the Sith was when we see Vader and Palpatine looking out at the Death Star together, at it being constructed, and knowing it's going to be destroyed, and that eventually Luke will turn his father back to the light side and kill Palpatine. I mean, that is in no way a tragedy. Knowing the bad guys will fail and lose in the end is never a tragedy. They, Kamir and Osha, are both murderers and have now embraced the dark side. They have embraced the very epitome of evil. And even Headland seems to acknowledge they now want to go out there and conquer the world. And that quite simply is what the dark side is, or is all about. That's what it does to you. It twists you and turns you into something evil. It turns you into a puppet of it. There is no other way around it. There is nothing else it is supposed to represent but evil. I'll once again play this clip from George Lucas in case you didn't realize that those who embrace the dark side are very much supposed to represent the worst of the worst.
Palpatine represents the devil. He represents the pure evil, the Dark Lord of the Sith, who is purely out to get more power and his greed.
I'm appointing you.
And look, you can certainly like the bad guys in a story. You can even, in the context of the story, knowing that it is fictional, you can root for them if you really want to. You can want to see the bad guys win because you think they're cool or have a love for the character or whatever it might be. Again, you're aware it's fictional and no one is really being hurt by them. But I don't think the point of a story, one set in the Star Wars galaxy especially, should ever be about truly rooting for the bad guys to win, which she almost seems to be saying she wants us to do. Taking what she said here along with other interviews that she's done, where she talks about sympathizing with Khmer, looking past all the terrible things he's done, and just looking at his desire for freedom, we're supposed to kind of root for the guy. And I don't know, trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, maybe she is just talking about in the context of the story. I don't know, maybe she's just saying it's a tragedy for them, for the characters. The same way Palpatine kind of described Plagueis' story as a tragedy, right? Or then again, maybe she's saying it's a tragedy for those who, again, are aware that this is a fictional story and have set aside the terrible things they have done because they're not real and don't really hurt anybody. And they want to see them live happily ever after because, as Headland even kind of said, they want to see them married or something. However, when you also factor in that one of these interviews, and the article from GQ didn't really give full context, it didn't really say what questions she may have been responding to or why she said exactly what she said here, and I'll put up on screen the part of the article that talks about this, but Headland apparently said that the Jedi are extremely flawed and always have been. Which is then a little more than saying, hey, in my story, I want you to root for the bad guys. It's saying, I think the good guys really aren't the good guys. And this is all just a really strange thing to say about an organization that, again, in story, have been the guardians of peace and justice for 1,000 generations before the Dark Times, before the Empire. It's a rather strange thing to say about an organization or individuals that try to be the epitome of selflessness and is based on compassion or love for all. And the thing is, the problem with this is that it's her story, the story she has created, that is arguably by far the most damning evidence we have against the Jedi. She is the one coming up with a story that paints them in a horrible light. See how bad they are, this story I just made up proves it. And despite what many out there want to believe, it was not the point of the prequels to paint the Jedi in a terrible light and say they were flawed all along. You're going to be very hard-pressed to find anything George Lucas ever said that condemns the Jedi. I mean, think of how ridiculous the story of Star Wars that he created would be from start to finish if George Lucas really thought that they were the bad guys all along. If he really didn't think they were a true and genuine force for good in the galaxy. I mean, he starts out by making 3 movies, a trilogy, the original trilogy, that basically says how the galaxy needs the Jedi back, and it then ends with a film called Return of the Jedi. And it is implied, now that Luke is a Jedi and is going to train more, that we will get a happily ever after ending. But then, some seem to think he made another trilogy, the prequel trilogy, that completely contradicts or undermines that message from the first trilogy. They seem to think he made a story about why the Jedi need to return, and then followed it up by making a story about why they're bad. And though I don't want to get too much into this right now, I don't want to get too far off topic, but let me quickly read this quote from George Lucas after he was asked once if the Jedi are, or if the Jedi way is lonely. Not if you're not afraid. A Jedi is never lonely. They live on compassion. They live on helping people, and people love them. They can love people back, but when that person dies, they let go. Those that cannot let go become miserable. That's the lonely place. That then kind of brings us to another recent thing Headland said, which is her talking again about Osha and her choice to go to the dark side. How can we have someone embrace the dark side without being tricked into it, without stripping her of agency? She then also went on to say of, again, Osha and the Stranger, there are plenty of options besides being a Sith and apprentice and master. And first of all, I just gotta kind of completely disagree with what she said there. I find it a little odd that she's kind of proud of the fact that her character wanted to embrace the dark side of her own free will, which is actually what all who choose the dark side do. They all ultimately have a choice to either reject it or go down the dark path. You can't force someone to be evil. You can try to lead them there, you can try to trick them and do all that, like Palpatine did with Anakin, but ultimately, when it came right down to it, the choice was Anakin's. He had agency in that situation. He could have saved Windu and taken care of Palpatine, but he didn't. And like I said in yesterday's video, Star Wars is about choices, which is one of the things I truly enjoy about it. I like that no one is born evil. Even Palpatine was not born evil. He made choices along the way that, as Lucas said, turned him into basically the literal devil. The other thing she said also doesn't really make a lot of sense, because though they may not call themselves Sith, Osha and Kamir may not call themselves Sith or even think of themselves as such, though I do believe Headland refers to them in one of these interviews as Sith. I don't know if that was intentional or just a kind of generic thing she's saying about them, but that is simply not how the dark side works. There is no sharing power. There is no considering each other as equals. That has been tried before and failed. There is always going to be the one who has the power or more power, and the other one who craves it or craves to be the one with more power. That is simply what the dark side does to you. It doesn't matter if you call yourselves a Sith or not. This is the problem. This is what is going to happen regardless. It again is the danger of embracing the dark side. Once you choose that path, forever will it dominate your destiny. And it tragically leads to, as Lucas was kind of getting at in that response of his I read about the Jedi being lonely, but the dark side is the lonely side. It is wanting everything and being afraid you'll either lose it or never get it, and then never being able to truly trust anyone because you're always afraid they're going to try to take or get in your way, and thus everyone simply becomes an obstacle in your way of getting what you want. And finally here, Headland seems to confirm that at the very end, Venestra is indeed about to tell Yoda everything, and of that she says, in Venestra's effort to protect the Jedi, at some point she would have to inform her superior. And so, yeah, it sure sounds like she is about to tell Yoda that she just lied to the Senate and to the Chancellor, and that she just framed Sol as a murderer. And apparently Yoda is just going to go along with it. He is going to play his part in the cover-up. That is what Star Wars has become under Disney, I guess. The Jedi always being flawed and partaking in massive cover-ups, while trying to paint the Sith as tragic heroes. Well, that's going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about some of these things that Headland had to say. So again, do leave a comment below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.